Have you ever found yourself maybe late at night or just, stuck in traffic, caught in that relentless mental loop where your mind just cycles through everything that could possibly go wrong?
Oh, definitely. That feeling of anxiety about the future, it's universal, isn't it?
It really is. Maybe it's a looming deadline at work or an unexpected bill or just the big, vast uncertainty of what tomorrow holds. It can feel like such a heavy burden.
Yeah, I can weigh you down.
But what if, and this sounds a bit strange maybe, what if that very impulse, that tendency we have to foresee difficulties could actually be transformed?
Transform how?
Well, what if it could become not a source of stress, but actually a kind of superpower, a tool for building, like an unshakable inner calm?
Okay, now that does sound paradoxical.
Yeah.
The idea that intentionally thinking about potential problems doesn't invite them, but instead helps you, builds resilience, reduces anxiety.
Exactly. And even, get this, deepens your appreciation for everything that's actually good in your life right now.
Right. And that's actually tapping into a really ancient philosophical practice, isn't it?
Yeah. It is, and that's where we're heading today. We're embarking on a deep dive into something called Premeditatio Malorum.
Which literally translates to the premeditation of evils. Sounds a bit grim on the surface.
It does, and let's be absolutely clear right from the start. This isn't about wallowing in gloom or embracing pessimism or, trying to manifest bad things into your life through negative thinking.
Not at all. It's quite the opposite, really.
Yeah, this practice, it's a cornerstone of Stoic wisdom, and it's all about being profoundly prepared, deeply resilient, and actually truly present in your life.
So our mission today, then, is to unpack this powerful concept. We need to go beyond just the definition and really understand its depth.
Right. We'll look at its origins, the really rich Stoic philosophy that underpins it all.
And we should definitely explore the practical ways ancient thinkers actually used it in their own,
Oh,
often very demanding lives.
absolutely. And most importantly, show you how you can harness this timeless wisdom right now in your own life to build incredible inner strength
And significantly reduce anxiety about the future.
and cultivate that enduring, vibrant appreciation for the good that is already yours.
Okay, so get ready, because this could fundamentally transform your relationship with worry.
Turning it from that weight that drags you down into, well, a finely tuned tool for navigating life's inevitable challenges with maybe a bit more grace and gratitude.
All right, so let's start by defining this practice, because it is often misunderstood. Premeditatio Malorum.
The premeditation of evils.
Right. Or, maybe more helpfully, imagining what can go wrong. At its heart, it's a deliberate, conscious mental rehearsal of future adversities.
So you're intentionally thinking through potential difficulties, not just letting your mind race, but doing it on purpose.
Exactly. And not with the aim of drawing them closer or dwelling on them anxiously, but with the profound purpose of preparing yourself mentally and emotionally for their possibility.
Okay, and this is where that absolutely crucial distinction comes in, isn't it? Because I think a lot of people hear negative visualization, and their immediate reaction is, whoa, hold on, I don't want to invite negativity.
That's the knee-jerk reaction for sure.
Yeah.
I'm going to make myself more anxious if I think about bad things.
Or I'll somehow cause them to happen, like the law of attraction in reverse or something.
Right. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding of the Stoic intent. It's vital to understand this practice is not about cultivating pessimism. It's not about passively dwelling on negativity.
So what is it then, if not pessimism?
It's a highly strategic psychological exercise. Think of it like that. The Stoics used it specifically to prevent being caught completely off guard by life's inevitable curveballs.
Ah, okay. So it's about reducing the shock factor.
Reducing the shock, exactly. And crucially, tempering their desires for things that were ultimately outside their complete control. It's proactive. A form of mental fire drill, if you like.
Yeah, a mental fire drill. I like that analogy. So it's less about forecasting doom and gloom and more about building a kind of mental immunity, like you're going to the gym for your mind, specifically strengthening those psychological muscles against potential shocks.
That's a wonderful way to put it. A mental gym indeed. And the goal here is actually threefold, and they're all deeply connected.
Okay, what are they?
First, it aims to build immense mental fortitude. You become less easily shaken. You're not blindsided by misfortune.
Makes sense. Be prepared.
Second, it works to significantly reduce the shock and blunt the emotional impact of unexpected difficulties when they do happen. This allows for a more measured, more rational response instead of panic.
Right, you've already kind of walked through it mentally.
Exactly. And third, and this is the part that often surprises people the most, It serves to deepen your appreciation for the blessings you currently have right now in your present life.
Okay, that third part, the gratitude and joy aspect, is often the most surprising, as you say. How does actively thinking about potentially bad things, losses, hardships, actually make you more grateful for the good that's already here? It feels so counterintuitive.
It really does feel counterintuitive, but it's profoundly effective. It works as a powerful mechanism of contrast.
Contrast, how so?
Well, by intentionally contemplating the loss of something you deeply value, maybe your health, maybe the presence of a loved one, your financial stability, even just simple daily comforts like hot water,
Okay.
you create a vivid imagined absence. And in that imagined absence, you become acutely, intensely aware of its presence right now and its true, often unacknowledged worth,
So you move from taking things for granted.
to actively appreciating them.
Yeah.
Imagine for a moment, just briefly, waking up tomorrow without your sight, or your mobility, or without the people you love most.
That's heavy.
Heavy. Feel that imagined weight, that sudden absence. Now open your mental eyes. Acknowledge your health, whatever state it's in. Hear the voice of a friend. Feel the warmth of the sun. Suddenly, that ordinary wall, that cup of coffee, the simple fact you can walk across the room, they're imbued with this profound significance you might have habitually ignored just moments before.
Wow. Okay. That stark contrast forces gratitude right into the foreground. It transforms the mundane into the miraculous almost.
Precisely. It makes you realize how much we overlook until it's threatened, even just hypothetically.
So the Stoics didn't just see this as a clever psychological trick. They saw it as genuine wisdom. Why was it deemed so essential in their philosophy? What was the ultimate aim they were shooting for with this?
That's a great question. At its core, the Stoics considered tranquility, or ataraxia as they called it, to be the highest psychological state a human could aspire to.
Ataraxia. We hear that word a lot with Stoicism, but it doesn't mean being emotionless, right?
Not at all. That's a common misconception. It wasn't about being detached from life like a robot. Rather, it was a state characterized by the absence of extreme negative emotions. Things like chronic anxiety, acute grief, excessive fear, irrational anger.
The really destructive stuff.
Yeah, exactly. The destructive stuff. And critically, it wasn't just about removing the bad. It was also about an abundance of positive emotions, especially a deep, abiding joy.
Joy. Interesting. So tranquility plus joy.
Yes, they firmly believed that the immense value of such a tranquil, joyful state would become undeniably apparent in virtually everyone's life at some point, especially when you're faced with life's inevitable challenges.
So Premeditatio Malorum isn't just a coping mechanism for when things go bad. It's positioned as a direct, proactive path towards this deeper, more resilient, and ultimately more joyful way of being.
Precisely. Negative visualization serves as a direct pathway to this sought-after tranquility because it systematically makes you less susceptible to emotional disturbance caused by external events.
How does it do that? Exactly.
Well, if you've already mentally rehearsed losing something, a job, a possession, the respect of others, even your health, the actual loss, should it occur, simply won't hit you with the same devastating emotional force.
Because you've sort of pre-processed the emotional data.
You've essentially pre-processed it, yes. This cognitive rehearsal allows your mind to maintain a greater degree of inner calm. It helps you differentiate between what Seneca called reflexive grief, that initial natural human pang of loss.
Which is okay to feel.
Which is perfectly natural and okay to feel, and prolonged suffering, which is often based on false judgments about the situation, like this shouldn't have happened or my life is ruined, and that can consume you.
So the practice is like a cognitive vaccine almost, building up mental antibodies against distress before the real infection hits.
That's a perfect analogy. A cognitive vaccine. It builds your psychological immune system.
Okay, understanding that connection to ataraxia, to tranquility and joy makes a world of difference. But this practice, Premeditatio Malorum, doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? It's deeply interwoven with the whole fabric of Stoic philosophy.
Absolutely. You can't really grasp its power without understanding the foundational ideas that support something that seems, on the face of it, so counterintuitive.
Right. So where do we start? What's the bedrock?
If we're connecting this practice to the wider Stoic worldview, the absolute cornerstone, especially as articulated by Epictetus, is what's famously known as the dichotomy of control.
Ah, yes, the dichotomy of control. This comes up again and again.
Because it's fundamental. This teaching profoundly divides the entire world, everything we experience, into two distinct categories.
Only two.
Essentially, yes, things under our complete control and things not under our complete control. This seemingly simple distinction is, in fact, the linchpin of Stoic freedom and tranquility.
And I think this is where so many of us in modern life get irrevocably tripped up. We spend so much energy, so much emotional capital, trying to influence or outright control things that are fundamentally, stubbornly, just beyond our grasp.
That's a major source of frustration and anxiety, isn't it?
Yeah.
Constantly pushing against immovable objects.
Totally. So what did Epictetus say falls into each category? Be specific.
He was incredibly precise, leaving very little room for ambiguity. In our power, he taught, are things like our opinions or judgments. The Greek word is hypolapsis, our impulses or movements towards things horme. Our desires, our aversions or movements away from things eklesis. Basically, our acts of will and our internal responses, our inner world.
Our thoughts, our choices, how we decide to react.
Exactly. These, he declared, are inherently free, unhindered, unconstrained. They are truly ours.
Okay, so what's not in our power then?
Pretty much everything else. Our body, its health, its appearance, ultimately its lifespan. Our property, our possessions, our reputation, what other people think of us, our social standing, positions of office we might hold, and of course all external events, the weather, economic downturns, pandemics, other people's actions.
So basically the external world and its outcomes.
Right. These things, Epictetus said, are weak, slavish, subject to restraint and ultimately in the power of others, or simply random chance or fate.
Now, I seem to recall Epictetus maybe hinted at a kind of third set of things we have partial control over, like maybe our health through diet and exercise, or the outcome of a project through effort.
That's a critical nuance, yes.
Yeah.
He acknowledges things over which we might have some influence. You can influence your health, but you can't guarantee it. You can influence a project's success, but you can't control every variable.
So where did he say to focus our energy?
The emphasis, the core Stoic practice, is always on discerning that clear line between complete control and not complete control, and then directing our precious mental and emotional energy exclusively towards what is completely controllable, our inner world. It's a very pragmatic focus.
Okay, and the promise there is serenity.
Exactly. The profound promise, the core of what the Stoics call the discipline of desire, is nothing less than serenity, ataraxia. By meticulously training ourselves to desire only what is completely in our control, our judgments, our character, our actions, we achieve this serenity because, in a very real and profound sense, we always get what we want.
How so? How do we always get what we want?
Because if you desire internal virtue, if you desire to respond wisely and justly, that is always available to you no matter what's happening externally. Your goal is internal, not external outcome dependent.
Ah, I see. So Premeditatio Malorum connects directly to this by helping us mentally categorize and then let go of our attachment to those external things. Put them firmly in the not in my power box.
Precisely. By systematically visualizing externals going wrong, losing wealth, health, relationships, comfort, we are actively practicing putting them into the not in our power category. This deliberate mental exercise helps dramatically reduce our irrational attachment to them.
So it lessens the sting if they do go wrong.
It lessens the sting, exactly. It strengthens our resolve to keep our desires fixed only on what is in our complete power, shielding us from the inevitable disappointments and anxieties that come from desperately chasing external outcomes we can't guarantee.
That makes perfect sense. And this naturally leads us to the next critical pillar, doesn't it? How we actually process the world around us. The Stoics talked a lot about impressions and judgments.
Yes, this is another crucial piece of the puzzle, how we filter reality.
So what's an impression?
What's truly fascinating here is how meticulously the Stoics dissected our perception. Epictetus and the earlier Stoics defined an impression, the Greek is phantasia, as basically anything that appears to us. Any thought, any perception, any object of awareness that pops into our mind.
So it could be really simple, like seeing a dog.
Exactly. Here is a dog. Or it could be a complex conceptual thought like money is highly desirable, or public speaking is terrifying, or death is the worst possible evil.
Okay. And these impressions, they usually come structured as statements, right? Like true or false statements.
Generally, yes. Human impressions usually have a propositional structure. They present themselves as potentially true or false. And here's the key. As humans, we are naturally inclined to just accept those impressions that appear true, often without much critical scrutiny. We just react.
So the impression is the raw data, the initial thought or perception, and then our judgment is the layer we add on top, the interpretation, the value we assign.
Precisely. That's where the action is, so to speak. The judgment is the assent we give, the value we attach, and that's where things can often go awry and lead us straight into distress.
Because the Stoics believe the judging part is where our rationality and character really come into play.
Absolutely. They viewed the process of judging and interpreting these initial impressions as the ultimate test of human rationality and moral character. It's our uniquely human capacity.
It makes me think of that line from Shakespeare's Hamlet.
There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Exactly. That perfectly encapsulates this Stoic insight, doesn't it?
It really does. It aligns perfectly with the Stoic view. External things themselves are inherently indifferent, neither good nor bad. It is only our judgments about them, the value we assign, that determine whether we perceive them as good or bad, and consequently how we emotionally react.
Can you give some of those concrete examples from Epictetus again? They really help ground this idea.
Sure, Epictetus would insist on a dispassionate, factual description. So if your ship is lost at sea, he'd advise you to simply say, the ship is lost, full stop.
Not, oh, woe is me, why did this happen to me? This is awful, my life is over.
Exactly. All of that latter part is adding judgments of suffering, unfairness, catastrophe that are not inherent in the simple fact of the ship being lost. Or if you see someone bathing quickly, just say, they bathed quickly.
Not, ugh, they wash themselves badly, which implies a judgment about their hygiene or character.
Right. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, constantly applied this in his own life. If someone insulted him, he trained himself to note it factually. So-and-so said this about me, period, without adding the judgment that this has harmed me or this has diminished my character.
Because the insult itself is just an external event, words spoken, it's indifferent. His judgment determines the emotional impact.
Precisely. His judgment determines whether it disturbs his inner peace or not.
So Premeditatio Malorum helps us build that critical cognitive muscle, the ability to pause and challenge those knee-jerk value judgments when negative events or even just the thought of negative events pop up. It's like a rapid response filter for our thoughts.
That's a great way to put it, a rapid response filter. It systematically prepares us to meet potential negative events by training us to immediately challenge our initial, often emotionally charged value judgments. This practice is key to preventing negative emotions from taking root and spiraling into distress.
So it allows us to maintain a more rational and tranquil mind, even when things get tough.
Exactly.
Now, speaking of negative emotions, there's this persistent myth, isn't there, that Stoics are all about bottling up feelings, being cold, unfeeling robots, stern faces, stiff upper lips.
Oh, absolutely. It's a common and really damaging misunderstanding. It couldn't be further from the truth.
So they didn't advocate bottling things up.
No. Their advice was far more sophisticated. They outlined proactive steps to prevent negative emotions from arising in the first place, and if prevention failed, to overcome them swiftly through rational analysis.
Ah, okay. So if an emotion is successfully prevented or overcome,
Then there's nothing left to bottle up. It's about not letting the destructive emotion take hold, rather than suppressing it once it has. It's prevention and cure, not suppression.
that's a subtle but really significant difference. It shifts the focus from suppression, which is often unhealthy, to proactive psychological management and prevention.
Precisely. Take Seneca, for example. He was a deeply empathetic Stoic, and he acknowledged that experiencing a spontaneous pang of grief after a personal catastrophe, like the death of a loved one, is perfectly natural, is deeply human. He called this reflexive grief.
Okay, so that initial shock, that pain, is unavoidable.
Right. A Stoic experiencing such a loss would acknowledge this initial pang, this natural human response. But the discipline comes in not letting it devolve into prolonged suffering, self-pity, or, crucially, false judgments about the situation.
Like thinking this is unfair or my life is meaningless now.
Exactly. Those are judgments layered on top of the natural grief. The initial emotional shock is unavoidable, but allowing it to consume you or making irrational judgments based on it, that's where the Stoic discipline comes in.
And the Stoics considered these really extreme negative emotions, these overwhelming passions like uncontrolled rage or intense fear, to be incredibly damaging, almost like a mental illness.
They absolutely did. Extreme negative emotions, what they termed passions, like intense anger, excessive fear, profound, all-consuming grief, were regarded as harmful. They believed these passions were rooted in false opinions and judgments.
So bad thinking leads to bad feelings.
Essentially, yes. They saw these passions as akin to little mental illnesses that could hijack the mind, completely disrupting our rationality and inner peace. Seneca famously declared anger a temporary form of madness, highlighting just how irrational and destructive he thought it was.
So the ultimate goal isn't this cold, emotionless existence at all. It's actually about preventing these mental illnesses and cultivating a state of deep tranquility and genuine joy.
Far from emotionless. The aim is that psychological state of profound tranquility, ataraxia, where you experience very few, if any, of these destructive negative emotions, but instead enjoy an abundance of positive ones, especially that deep, abiding joy we mentioned.
It's not a flat line then. It's actually quite vibrant.
Very vibrant. It can even manifest as what Seneca called little outbursts of joy, spontaneous moments where you just feel delighted to be the person you are, living the life you are living in this particular universe. It's a deeply contented, appreciative state.
And Premeditatio Malorum helps get you there.
It acts as a powerful preventative measure. By mentally preparing for potential losses or difficulties, it helps prevent that initial surge of extreme negative emotion when things actually happen. It allows for a more tranquil, rational, and ultimately a more joyful response to life's ups and downs.
Okay, that makes sense. And this leads us to maybe the broadest, most encompassing Stoic concept that underpins all of this. The idea of living in agreement with nature or fate or providence. This one can sound a bit abstract, maybe even fatalistic to modern ears.
It can, yes, but it's profoundly central to their whole philosophy. It's really important to wrap your head around this one.
So what did they mean by living in agreement with nature?
Well, the Stoics believed that a fundamental rationality permeates the entire universe, permeates nature itself. You can see it in its predictable patterns, its intricate laws, its cycles, like the seasons, the orbits of planets.
Order and reason in the cosmos.
Exactly. And as humans, we are an integral part of this nature. Crucially, we are uniquely endowed with the capacity for rationality ourselves. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that if we live in agreement with nature, meaning align our own rational nature with the rational nature of the universe, our lives will flow smoothly.
So struggling against the inherent order of things, constantly fighting the current, just leads to friction and unhappiness.
Precisely. It's like trying to swim upstream constantly. You'll just exhaust yourself and get nowhere.
And this connects to ideas of providence or fate.
Yes. The Stoics held a powerful belief that all situations are, in a grand sense, providentially determined. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean a personal meddling deity pulling strings like a puppeteer.
More like a universal reason, a logos, an interconnected web of cause and effect.
Exactly. A vast, rational, causal chain of events. If we cultivate minds that understand and accept this interconnectedness, this flow, we are not only able to accept what happens as inevitable.
But we can also regard it as our specific allotment, our part to play.
Yes, our role in the grand cosmic drama. An opportunity to play our unique human part in this vast plan. For committed Stoics, conventional misfortunes, illness, loss, setbacks aren't just random bad luck.
They're interpreted as challenges, opportunities even.
Yes, challenges to be accepted, even welcomed, as ways to prove and demonstrate their rationality, their dignity, their progress as human beings. Epictetus often links accepting events to the commands of Zeus, seeing everything as part of a divine, rational administration, not some chaotic, malicious force.
Okay, but this sounds incredibly deterministic, like our choices don't matter at all. Yet the Stoics also heavily emphasized human responsibility and our internal freedom. That seems like a major contradiction. How did they square that circle?
That's a crucial point of nuance, and it's where people often misunderstand Stoicism. While they held a deterministic view of external events, that everything unfolds according to this rational, causal pattern, they emphatically did not dismiss human responsibility or agency.
So where does our freedom lie?
Our unique power, our freedom, lies in our reasoning ability, our capacity to form judgments about impressions, and our ability to give or withhold assent to those judgments, our internal response. While we cannot control the external events that happen to us,
We always control our internal response to them, our judgment, our will.
always, that inner citadel is inviolable. We can use our reason to circumvent, say, evolutionary programming that might push us towards irrational fears, or excessive desires for status, or fleeting pleasures that ultimately undermine our tranquility. Our internal will, our volition, proheriasis, remains free within the bounds of determined external events.
And Premeditatio Malorum fits into this perfectly.
Perfectly. By imagining worst-case scenarios and mentally accepting them as possibilities within this natural, rational order, you align yourself with this cosmic flow. It prepares your mind to accept whatever fate brings, not with passive resignation, but with a robust understanding that your inner peace, your core self, remains untouched.
So it's about accepting what is externally and focusing all your energy on directing your internal world, your judgments, your desires towards that acceptance, thereby claiming your freedom within fate.
Beautifully put. That's the essence of it. Freedom within fate. Hashtag tag 33. Practical applications and profound benefits of negative visualization.
Okay, we've thoroughly grounded ourselves in the philosophy now. The dichotomy of control, impressions and judgments, living with nature, it all provides a really solid framework.
It does. It shows Premeditatio Malorum isn't just some random technique, but part of a coherent system.
Right. So now let's move from the theory to the practice. How did the ancient Stoics actually use negative visualization in their daily lives? And maybe more importantly, what tangible, profound benefits can we, as modern folks, navigating our own complex world gain from it today?
Good question. Let's get practical.
One of the most powerful applications, and maybe the most universal ones, seems to be using it to confront the fear of death itself, that primal fear.
Absolutely. Dealing with mortality is central.
Yeah.
What's remarkable is the Stoic approach. Think about it. In youth, contemplating death often takes a conscious, sometimes uncomfortable effort.
Yeah, we tend to push it away, think it's far off for other people.
We delude ourselves, perhaps naturally. But as we age, avoiding the thought of death becomes increasingly difficult. Its inevitability looms larger. Old age, in a way, naturally forces us to confront what the Stoics recommended doing consciously all along, regularly reflecting on our own mortality.
And the incredible paradox you mentioned earlier is that by actively contemplating our own death, we can actually increase our joy in the present moment. That still feels deeply counterintuitive to most of us.
It does, but it's a profound psychological truth the Stoics really grasped. By regularly contemplating our own death, paradoxically, we significantly increase our chances of experiencing deep, vibrant joy in our present days.
Wow. Why?
Think about Socrates, whom Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, deeply admired. Socrates famously called the idea that death is inherently terrible a mask to frighten small children. He even suggested singing a kind of daily charm, or doing a mental exercise to cure ourselves of this pervasive fear.
So analyze it rationally. Strip away the fear.
Exactly. A rational analysis of death, stripping away the cultural assumptions and primal fears, reveals it as nothing more than a natural process, a part of nature's cycle, an indifferent event in the grand scheme. As Seneca bluntly put it, death does not bite. The idea of death bites, the fear bites, but the event itself, it's just dissolution.
So the fear of death, in a very real sense, does more harm to us than death itself ever could. It's the dread, not the event.
Absolutely. The fear of death causes us infinitely more suffering and moral degradation than death itself. It turns us into cowards, makes us slaves to external circumstances, slaves to preserving our lives at any cost, even the cost of our integrity.
So to learn how to die is to unlearn how to be a slave.
That's exactly how the Stoics saw it. To learn how to die, meaning to accept mortality without fear, was to unlearn how to be a slave to fear, to convention, to anxiety about the future. The wise and good person, according to Seneca, unquestionably enjoys life to its fullest, appreciates every moment. But they are utterly unafraid of dying when the time comes.
What was Seneca's practical advice then?
Potent advice. He said things like, "Let us compose our thoughts every day as if we've already reached the very end. Let us postpone nothing. Let's settle our account with life every single day."
Live each day as if it were your last, essentially.
Yes, but with a specific mindset. And then, if we wake up to a new day, let us receive it gladly, as an unexpected gift, a bonus day.
Ah, I like that, a bonus day.
This practice ensures we die daily in our minds, accepting the end. And in doing so, we rise each morning with a profit, having gained an extra day. This allows us to live each moment more fully, with profound gratitude and a keen awareness of its preciousness, because we know it's not guaranteed.
That reframing of time, seeing each day as a gift, is incredibly powerful. Okay, so beyond the ultimate challenge of death, the Stoics also applied Premeditatio Malorum to handle all sorts of other adversity and loss, right? Things like exile, poverty, illness.
Yes, they applied the same fundamental principle to these more common, yet still potentially devastating misfortunes. They approached them with remarkable mental fortitude, using premeditation as their primary shield and weapon.
Take exile, for example. That seems pretty devastating.
Consider Musonius Rufus, who was Epictetus's teacher. He was exiled multiple times under the emperors Nero and Vespasian. But based on his own experience, he observed that exile could actually change people for the better.
Oh, so being forced out of your home.
Well, it often forced people to curtail luxurious living, which sometimes improved their physical health. More importantly, it could strip away distractions and even transform ordinary people into philosophers, forcing them towards self-sufficiency and introspection. He pointed to Diogenes of Sinope as an example.
The famous cynic philosopher who lived in a barrel.
That's the one. When Diogenes was exiled from his hometown of Sinope, allegedly for defacing the currency, he famously quipped that while the people of Sinope had sentenced him to exile, he, in turn, had sentenced them to remain in Sinope.
Ah, that's brilliant. A total reframe.
It wasn't just a clever retort. It was a profound reframing of a perceived misfortune. He saw it as an opportunity for radical freedom and self-sufficiency. Musonius Rufus himself, rather than complaining about his own exiles, used them as opportunities to simplify his life and deepen his philosophical practice.
Okay, and what about poverty? Another major fear for many people. Was it viewed through a similar lens?
Absolutely. Epictetus made a really striking assertion. He said, "It is better to die of hunger with distress and fear gone than to live upset in the midst of plenty."
Wow, that puts things in perspective.
For the Stoics, true wealth wasn't about piles of gold or fancy houses. It lay in inner contentment, self-sufficiency, and virtue. Therefore, not needing wealth, being indifferent to its presence or absence, was far more valuable and liberating than simply possessing it.
So poverty, through this lens, becomes an opportunity to practice detachment from externals and build inner resilience.
Precisely. A training ground for virtue.
And what about physical pain or illness? Those are so universal, often inescapable. How did Premeditatio Malorum help there? Did they just say grin and bear it?
Not quite grin and bear it, but something more sophisticated. Seneca, who suffered from chronic ill health, likely asthma, his whole life, offered some really profound insights into dealing with pain.
What did he observe?
He observed that pain, by its very nature, tends to do one of two things. It either eventually stops, or at least it falls in intensity. It rarely stays at peak level indefinitely. Plus, he noted, it often gives some advance warning, allowing for a degree of mental preparation.
Okay, and his key insight?
His key insight was this. Provided that one's thinking has not been adding anything to it, pain is a trivial sort of thing.
Trivial. That sounds harsh when you're in agony.
Well, trivial in the sense that the physical sensation itself might be intense, but the suffering we experience is vastly magnified by our judgments about the pain. The, "oh no, this is unbearable, this will never end, why me?" thoughts.
So our thinking, our judgments, largely determine our experience of suffering from it.
Exactly. Marcus Aurelius found it incredibly helpful to mentally compartmentalize pain. He'd think of it as being confined to a specific body part, his hand, his foot, rather than allowing the idea of the pain to become this pervasive, all-consuming mental anguish that takes over his entire being.
That's interesting. Keep it localized.
Keep it localized and recognize its limits. He famously added his own Stoic twist to a saying from Epicurus about pain. Pain is neither unendurable nor everlasting if you keep its limits in mind and do not add to it through your own imagination.
Do not add to it through your own imagination. That's key. Our attitude, our judgment determines how upset we become.
Precisely. And by mentally rehearsing the possibility of pain or illness using Premeditatio Malorum, you prepare yourself to apply these rational judgments in the heat of the moment rather than being overwhelmed by the initial sensation and fear.
Okay, that makes sense for things like illness or poverty. But what about the loss of loved ones? Or the loss of treasured property? This seems like it would be incredibly difficult, almost impossible, to truly prepare for mentally without causing yourself immense distress just in the preparation.
It's undoubtedly one of the hardest applications, perhaps the hardest. But the Stoics offered a truly remarkable perspective, aiming for resilience even here.
Like the story of Stilbo.
Exactly. Consider Stilbo, the philosopher whose hometown was captured and sacked. In the chaos, he lost his children, his wife, his home, everything. Utter devastation.
Unimaginable.
Yet, according to the accounts, he emerged from this wreckage and declared, "I have all my valuables with me."
How could he possibly say that? Was he in shock? Deluded?
No, the Stoics would argue he was perfectly lucid. He wasn't referring to physical possessions or even his lost family, tragically. He was referring to his character, his inner qualities, his justice, his goodness, his wisdom, his enlightened mind, and his steadfast refusal to place ultimate value on anything that could be taken away by external circumstances.
Wow, so his valuables were internal, his virtue, which couldn't be looted or destroyed.
Exactly. This is the ultimate reflection of the Stoic principle of self-contentment, finding your true wealth within your own mind and character. By mentally rehearsing even these profound losses, imagining life without loved ones, without possessions. Individuals like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus found a way to bear them with a profound, almost unimaginable tranquility when they actually occurred.
Because they understood, through deep practice, that external circumstances, however devastating, cannot ultimately harm the inner self, the core volition, the capacity for virtue.
That's the core belief. Your inner citadel remains inviolable unless you allow it to be breached by faulty judgments.
These practical applications really paint a vivid picture of how negative visualization builds incredible resilience. But you also keep mentioning that it cultivates gratitude and joy, which, as we discussed, feels so backward. How does that work in daily life? How does thinking about losing my job make me happier now?
This is where the magic really happens, I think, where the seemingly negative practice yields the most profoundly positive results. Let's look at Marcus Aurelius again.
Okay. His meditation.
His Meditations famously begins not with some grand philosophical statement, but with a section often titled Debts and Lessons.
Right, where he thanks everyone, his grandfather, his mother, his teachers.
Exactly. He systematically acknowledges the profound lessons learned and the positive character traits inherited or inspired by every important person in his life. Now, this is partly a form of positive visualization, reflecting on the good influences.
Okay.
But it implicitly builds on an understanding of what could have been worse, what priceless influences could have been absent from his life. By appreciating what he did receive, he's implicitly contrasting it with the possibility of not having received it. This act instilled in him a deep sense of cheerful gratitude.
And it served as a reminder to live up to those virtues himself.
Precisely. It wasn't just passive thinking. It was an active reminder to exemplify those qualities. It's about actively appreciating what you possess, what you've been given, rather than perpetually longing for what you lack.
Yeah.
It fundamentally shifts your focus.
From lack to abundance, even if the external circumstances haven't changed.
Exactly. The Stoics place a strong emphasis on gratitude. And they weren't against pleasure either. They accepted pleasure in healthy, natural experiences, provided it wasn't excessive or uncontrolled. Pleasure itself, they argued, is morally indifferent, neither inherently good nor bad.
So enjoying a good meal or time with friends is perfectly fine.
Absolutely. Socrates, long before the main Stoic figures, astutely observed that those who practice self-control actually derive more pleasure from simple things like food and drink. Why? Because genuine hunger or thirst is the best relish. You appreciate it more when you're not constantly indulging.
That makes sense. Moderation enhances appreciation.
Precisely. Marcus Aurelius believed he could get just as much healthy enjoyment from the simplest meals or basic comforts as the most dedicated hedonists derive from their extravagant indulgences, but crucially, with far less self-inflicted suffering, regret, or dependence afterwards.
So the link to Premeditatio Malorum here is, by imagining the loss of these simple, everyday things, the taste of that meal, the comfort of a warm bed, the sound of birdsong, the company of a friend, we come to value them more deeply, more acutely, when they are present.
That's it exactly. This practice, by highlighting the potential hypothetical absence of our everyday blessings, dramatically enhances our joy and gratitude for what we currently have. It stops us from constantly yearning for what we lack, and instead opens our eyes to the often overlooked abundance already surrounding us.
Not necessarily material abundance, but abundance of experience, of simple goods.
Abundance of experience, yes. It shifts our focus from a pervasive sense of scarcity to a profound appreciation of what is.
That really does sound like a richer, more fulfilling way to navigate existence. And another key benefit that seems tied into all this is fostering moderation and a healthy detachment from external things, possessions, status, pursuits.
Yes, this is crucial. Seneca had some incredibly insightful and perhaps slightly curmudgeonly observations about how people, then as now, squander their lives.
What did he lament?
He lamented how many people fritter away their most valuable, irreplaceable asset, time itself, through things like limitless greed, the relentless pursuit of what he called useless undertakings, chronic drunkenness, pervasive idleness, cutthroat political ambition, risky business ventures, or even just self-inflicted slavery to keeping up appearances or meeting societal expectations.
It sounds depressingly familiar.
Doesn't it? He pointed out the irony. People are often meticulous and careful with their physical property, their money. They lock their doors at night. But their time, that finite resource, they let it slip away unnoticed and unvalued, letting anyone steal it with trivial demands.
Ouch. That's a stark reminder, then, to constantly reassess what we really want, how much we truly need, and perhaps most importantly, why we want it in the first place.
That's the very essence of the Stoic challenge to our desires. It continually nudges us to scrutinize them. Musonius Rufus, again, was very practical here. He emphasized that expending vast effort and resources to obtain costly, difficult-to-prepare foods just for a fleeting moment of gastronomic pleasure doesn't actually make us stronger, healthier, or genuinely happier in the long run.
So what did he advise instead?
He said responsible, rational people should favor what is simple, easy to obtain, involves no unnecessary trouble, and is readily available. It's a philosophy of intentional living, focusing on what truly nourishes, not just what titillates the senses briefly. It's not about deprivation, but about rational choice.
Okay, so it's about learning to enjoy things, maybe wealth, pleasures, comfort, but without grasping for them, without being enslaved by them, so that if they disappear, you're not crushed.
That's the core of Stoic detachment. It's not about rejecting the world, but about engaging with it wisely. We can learn to enjoy wealth and pleasures without clutching them too tightly, without allowing them to define our happiness or our sense of self-worth, and therefore without being utterly devastated when they inevitably change or disappear.
Because things inevitably change.
Always. The Stoics taught that the easiest, most direct path to genuine wealth is not through frantic accumulation, but by learning to be content with less, or rather, with simply enough, finding sufficiency within.
And Premeditatio Malorum acts as a kind of psychological guardrail here.
It acts as a crucial guardrail, yes. By regularly imagining losing our possessions, our status, our comforts, we systematically detach ourselves from overvaluing them. This powerful practice prevents our desires for these externals from making us profoundly vulnerable to disappointment, anxiety, and deep suffering when the vicissitudes of life inevitably take them away. It protects our inner equilibrium.
It's one thing to talk about these profound concepts, detachment, resilience, gratitude, but it's another thing entirely to see them put into practice by actual people living complex lives. Let's look at some of the key Stoic figures themselves. How did they embody these principles?
Seneca is always such a fascinating and maybe complicated example, isn't he? His life wasn't always a perfect mirror of his philosophy.
Seneca's life indeed presents a compelling and sometimes uncomfortable contrast between philosophical ideals and, well, practical realities. Here's a man who served as a tutor and advisor to the notoriously tyrannical Emperor Nero.
Not exactly a model Stoic leader, Nero.
Far from it. And Seneca, despite his eloquent writings denouncing extravagance and the pursuit of wealth, managed to amass a significant personal fortune himself. It led to accusations of hypocrisy, both then and now.
Right. It brings up that question. Can you be sincere in your principles, even if your practice sometimes falls short? Dr. Samuel Johnson had a great quote about this regarding Seneca, asking something like, "Sir, are you so grossly ignorant of human nature as not to know that a man may be very sincere in good principles without having good practice?" It highlights the inherent human struggle in living up to one's own ideals. We all fall short.
True. But despite those contradictions, Seneca clearly practiced what he preached internally, especially regarding premeditation.
Oh, absolutely. His chronic ill health he suffered badly from what was likely asthma, calling it his rehearsal of death, probably made him intimately familiar with contemplating misfortunes and his own mortality from a young age. His writings, especially his letters to Lucilius, are just packed with vivid examples of negative visualization.
What kind of things did he advise?
He constantly advocated retiring into one's inner self, learning to be comfortable in one's own company, and defining happiness solely by what is confined to that inner, inviolable core. He explicitly tells Lucilius to set aside days to practice poverty, to lie on a hard bed, eat coarse bread, and ask himself, is this the condition I feared? He regularly practiced imagining the loss of everything, external wealth, status, friends, even his own life, as a preparation for reality.
Okay. Then we have Epictetus. His early life was dramatically different from Seneca's wealthy background. Starting as a slave really gives his teachings a different kind of weight, doesn't it?
It really does. Epictetus' story is an incredible testament to the power of Stoicism in the face of extreme systemic adversity. Born a slave in the Roman Empire, belonging to Epaphroditus, who was himself a powerful freedman in Nero's court, Epictetus lived through considerable hardship.
He was lamed as a slave, wasn't he? Though the circumstances are debated.
Yes. Tradition holds he was lamed, possibly deliberately by his master, possibly due to illness or accident. Then later, as a respected teacher, he was famously exiled from Rome along with all other philosophers by the Emperor Domitian.
So he had to start over, establish his school elsewhere.
Exactly. He set up his school in Nicopolis in Greece, and accounts suggest he lived a very simple life, alone for many years before apparently adopting a child late in life to save it from exposure. Throughout all these trials, the core message we get from his teachings, recorded by his student Arian, is this constant focus. Keep in mind that your enemies or challenging external circumstances can only truly win if you allow them to.
How?
If you succumb to fear, if you lose your self-respect, if you compromise your inner integrity, your core principles, then they've won. But as long as your will, your judgment, remains aligned with virtue, you remain free and undefeated internally, regardless of the external conditions.
And his influence lasted centuries. You mentioned Vice Admiral James Stockdale earlier.
Yes, Stockdale's story is just such a powerful modern example. A prisoner of war in Vietnam for 7.5 agonizing years, enduring torture and solitary confinement.
And he credited Epictetus for his survival.
He explicitly credited Epictetus's philosophy, which he'd encountered studying at Stanford, for his psychological survival and his ability to lead his fellow prisoners under those unimaginably horrid conditions.
Yeah.
He apparently had a smuggled copy of Epictetus's Enchiridion, or parts of the discourses.
Wow. What specific idea helped him most?
He resolved, as he put it, to play whatever part fate had allotted to him to the best of his abilities. He constantly applied the dichotomy of control. He couldn't control being imprisoned, starved, or tortured, but he could control his attitudes, his judgments, his integrity, his will.
Even with physical injury, like his broken leg.
Especially then. His captors deliberately mistreated his broken leg, trying to break his spirit. But Stockdale refused to let the physical impediment define him or impede his will or his leadership. He understood deeply that his enemies would only truly win if he succumbed internally, if he abandoned his courage and self-respect. He mentally prepared for the worst, accepted the reality of his situation without despair, and focused solely on maintaining his inner freedom. That's Premeditatio Malorum and the dichotomy of control in extreme action.
An absolutely incredible story. And then, of course, we have the most famous Stoic, perhaps, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor. His meditations feel like a personal workbook for these practices.
That's exactly what they are. The Meditations wasn't written for publication. It's his personal journal, a series of spiritual exercises, reminders to himself, where he constantly grappled with applying Stoic principles in the incredibly demanding context of Rome, the Roman Empire.
And you can see him doing negative visualization right there on the page.
Constantly. He reminds himself to prepare for dealing with difficult, ungrateful, treacherous people each morning, anticipating their flaws, not to become angry, but to understand their ignorance and maintain his own equilibrium. He reflects on his own physical ailments, on the fleeting nature of power and fame, on his own mortality.
Right, that famous line about Alexander the Great and his mule driver ending up the same in the end.
Exactly. He practiced accepting everything assigned by fate, seeing it as part of the rational cosmic order. He rarely allowed himself to be overly concerned with judging others' actions unless it directly impacted the common good. He consciously and consistently worked to keep his ego in check, reminding himself that even the greatest names and achievements fade quickly into oblivion. It's all about perspective.
It's fascinating that someone born into such immense power, someone apparently naturally predisposed to virtue according to their own account, still felt the need for this rigorous daily mental practice.
It underscores that Stoicism isn't just for overcoming adversity, it's also for maintaining balance and virtue even amidst success and power. He was heavily influenced, as he acknowledges, by his tutors, particularly Junius Rusticus. Rusticus persuaded him to commit to Stoic philosophy not just as an interesting intellectual subject, but as a demanding, comprehensive way of life, choosing it over the potentially more prestigious path of rhetoric.
So Rusticus really pushed him towards practice, not just theory.
Yes, Rusticus's influence seems crucial in solidifying Marcus's dedication to these daily practices, the self-reflection, the premeditation, the constant examination of judgments, which we see him working through on virtually every page of the Meditations. It's a powerful testament to the perceived necessity of constant mental training, even for an emperor.
And briefly, we should also mention figures like Musonius Rufus again, Epictetus' teacher, and that philosopher Stilbo as further examples of this practical resilience.
Definitely. Musonius Rufus, as we touched on, was renowned for being incredibly practical. He gave clear, actionable advice on everything from major issues like the education of women, arguing they should receive the same philosophical education as men, to mundane things like diet, always favoring simple, easily obtained foods over fussy, expensive ones. His own experiences of being exiled multiple times provided a very real-world crucible for him to apply Stoic endurance and the power of accepting external circumstances without inner turmoil. he lived it.
And Stilbo, whose story is just so stark.
Stilbo's story, though perhaps somewhat legendary or embellished over time, serves as this ultimate powerful symbol of Stoic resilience. Again, his hometown sacked, family lost, emerging from the ruins and declaring, "I have all my valuables with me." He wasn't talking about gold or jewels.
He meant his character, his virtue, his inner state.
Exactly. His unshakable inner character, his justice, his rationality, his moral compass, and his profound refusal to attach ultimate value to anything external that could be taken away by the whims of fate or the violence of others. It stands as this potent example of the kind of deep resilience that can potentially be derived from an unwavering internal focus, a mastery of the dichotomy of control, and the practiced understanding of what truly belongs to you. #TagJavV. Stoicism's broader impact and modern relevance.
It's really clear that these ancient practices were incredibly effective for the Stoics themselves, enabling them to navigate just immense personal and political challenges. But what's truly remarkable, I think, is Stoicism's enduring legacy. It's not just some historical curiosity locked away in dusty books, is it? It seems to be the philosophical bedrock for so many evidence-based psychological therapies that are widely used today.
That's precisely right. And this is where things get really interesting for us now. If we want to connect this ancient wisdom directly to the modern world, one of its most compelling demonstrations of relevance is its clear lineage, its philosophical roots, leading directly to many of the most effective, scientifically validated psychological therapies practiced today.
That's a huge claim. The roots of modern therapy lie in ancient Stoicism.
It's not just a claim, it's acknowledged by the founders of these therapies themselves. This is a truly significant point of intersection between ancient philosophy and contemporary mental health science.
Okay, walk us through some specific examples. Which therapies are we talking about, and what's the connection?
Certainly. Let's start with Viktor Frankl and logotherapy. Frankl, as many know, was a neurologist and psychiatrist who survived the horrors of the Nazi concentration camps. He wrote the incredibly influential book, Man's Search for Meaning.
A truly profound book. His story of resilience is almost unbelievable.
It is. And his entire approach, logotherapy, which focuses on finding meaning even in suffering, can be read as a powerful contemporary embodiment of Stoicism in practice. Frankl himself explicitly acknowledged Stoicism's profound influence on his thinking. He often characterized logotherapy as a form of existential analysis, deeply rooted in the search for meaning and, crucially, the power we have to choose our attitude in any given set of circumstances.
That core idea that between stimulus and response there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. That sounds very Stoic.
It's pure Epictetus. That's almost a direct paraphrase of Stoic teaching. Our ultimate freedom lies in how we choose to respond to what happens.
Okay, who else? Albert Ellis is another name that often comes up.
Absolutely. Dr. Albert Ellis, a giant in 20th century psychotherapy. Some surveys suggest he had an even greater impact on modern psychotherapy practice than Sigmund Freud. And Ellis openly, repeatedly acknowledged Stoicism, particularly Epictetus, as a key foundational influence on his groundbreaking therapy, rational motive behavior therapy, or REBT.
REBT. What's the core idea there, and how does it link to Stoicism?
The absolute central tenet of REBT is the ABC model: activating event, beliefs, consequences. Ellis argued forcefully that it's not the activating event A that directly causes the emotional consequences, see like anxiety or depression. Instead, it's our irrational beliefs, B, about the event that are the primary cause of our distress.
So, again, it's not the thing that upsets us, but our judgment or belief about the thing.
Precisely. That's a direct echo, almost word for word, of Epictetus's famous maxim. Ellis essentially took that core Stoic insight and built a systematic therapeutic method around identifying and disputing those irrational beliefs.
And then, of course, there's cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which seems ubiquitous now. It's used for everything from depression and anxiety to PTSD and eating disorders.
Indeed. CBT is perhaps the most well-known and widely practiced family of evidence-based therapies today, and it owes an undeniable significant debt to Stoicism. Aaron T. Beck, another towering figure, often considered the father of cognitive therapy, particularly for depression.
Yes, author of Cognitive Therapy of Depression.
Right. Beck explicitly wrote, and I quote, "The philosophical origins of cognitive therapy can be traced back to the Stoic philosophers. The core CBT technique of identifying automatic negative thoughts, evaluating the evidence for them, and restructuring those maladaptive thought patterns is a direct, practical descendant of the Stoic discipline of examining your impressions and challenging faulty judgments."
So when a CBT therapist helps a client identify a thought like, if I fail this exam, my life is over, and then challenges them to look at the evidence and reframe it as, failing would be disappointing, but I could retake it or find other options, they're essentially doing applied stoicism.
They are essentially teaching the client to practice the Stoic art of judgment. They are guiding them to separate the external event, failing the exam, from the catastrophic, irrational judgment, my life is over, and replace it with a more rational, less emotionally disturbing assessment.
Wow. So these highly effective modern therapies are, in many ways, a scientific systematization and application of these core Stoic principles we've been discussing all along, especially the idea that our reactions stem from our judgments.
Precisely. It's a powerful testament to the timelessness and psychological accuracy of this ancient wisdom. The direct, undeniable link is that these therapies all leverage the core Stoic principle. We react primarily to our judgments about events, not to the raw events themselves. This insight is absolutely central to Premeditatio Malorum and the entire Stoic project of achieving tranquility.
It's really about empowering individuals to recognize and harness the immense power they already possess, the power over their internal reactions, their interpretations, regardless of what life throws at them externally.
Exactly. Puts the locus of control back where it truly belongs within our own minds.
And this modern relevance really hammers home another key point. For the ancients, philosophy wasn't just this abstract academic thing you debated in a lecture hall. It was meant to be lived. It was a vital, practical way of life.
That is perhaps the most crucial takeaway for anyone listening today who wants to actually use these ideas. Ancient philosophy, especially in the Hellenistic period with Stoicism, Epicureanism, skepticism, it wasn't merely theoretical wordplay. It was understood as a deeply practical way of life, a techne tu biou, sometimes described as a practice of wisdom or even an art of living.
So the goal wasn't just to know things, to acquire intellectual knowledge.
Knowledge was important, but it was a means to an end. The ultimate goal was to profoundly transform oneself, to achieve a particular state of being, to become virtuous, tranquil, resilient, wise, to become a sage, or at least to make significant, demonstrable progress towards that ideal. It was about shaping your character and your inner world through deliberate practice.
So Premeditatio Malorum isn't something you just read about once in a book and say, oh, that's interesting. It's meant to be an active practice, a skill you cultivate.
Yes, exactly. Premeditatio Malorum is a prime example of what the scholar Pierre Hadot called a spiritual exercise in the ancient sense. It's meant to be rigorously practiced, daily if possible, and deeply internalized, not merely intellectualized or debated.
Like lifting weights for the mind.
Precisely. This practice, like other Stoic exercises such as journaling, reviewing your day, or practicing the dichotomy of control, aims to fundamentally reshape your habits of thought and reaction. Its goal is to help us clearly distinguish, moment by moment, between our own concerns, those things completely controllable by our will and judgments, and those concerns that are decidedly not our own, the uncontrollable externals.
And by diligently making that distinction through practices like premeditation.
It leads, the Stoics believe, to a life increasingly free from lamentation and groaning, a life of greater tranquility, profound resilience, less fear, more courage, and ultimately a more consistent and enduring state of joy and gratitude. #outro.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive that was. We've explored how this ancient practice, premeditatio malorum, the deliberate and, let's be honest, sometimes surprising, practice of negative visualization is absolutely not about dwelling in gloom or embracing pessimism.
Not at all. Far from it.
Instead, it emerges as this powerful, profoundly positive tool. It's about forging an unshakable inner calm, building deep and lasting resilience against life's shocks, and cultivating this radical, almost startling appreciation for life as it actually is right now in all its fleeting beauty.
It really is like a mental gym, isn't it?
Yeah.
A daily workout for reducing anxiety, preparing yourself for life's inevitable challenges, and uncovering this deep, surprising wellspring of gratitude in the present moment.
And in a world like ours, just filled with constant worry, relentless information overload, and this endless pursuit of external validation, this ancient practice feels incredibly relevant. It offers a timeless, maybe even countercultural shortcut to being well-informed about possibilities and well-prepared internally.
Yeah, it helps you distinguish with real clarity between what is truly yours to control your thoughts, your actions, your character, and what must simply be accepted as part of the cosmic flow, part of nature. And that frees up so much energy for what truly matters.
So, thinking about the listener now, what does this all mean for you right now listening to this? If cultivating this clear-eyed picture of potential adversity can actually lead to genuine joy and profound appreciation, consider this.
Mhm.
What small, plausible catastrophe could you mentally prepare for today? Maybe not a huge disaster, but perhaps a minor setback at work, a potentially difficult conversation you need to have, or even just a common daily inconvenience like getting stuck in traffic or spilling your
Like
coffee.
small-scale premeditation.
Right. Mentally rehearse it briefly. Not to invite it or fear it, but just to acknowledge its possibility, to remind yourself of the limits of your control over it. And in doing that, perhaps discover a deeper sense of peace and maybe even an unexpected gratitude in its very absence if it doesn't happen.
That's a great practical takeaway. I would encourage you, maybe this week, just try a short moment of negative visualization each morning. Just a minute or two. Instead of only hoping for the best, take that moment to consider what could plausibly go wrong in your day.
Not to invite it.
Not to invite it, definitely not,
Yeah.
but to mentally prepare your internal response, to acknowledge the limits of your influence, and by doing that, perhaps unlock that surprising wellspring of tranquility and appreciation for everything that does go right, for every moment that flows smoothly, for every small blessing you might otherwise overlook.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the power of premeditation. Until next time, stay curious, perhaps stay a little more prepared, and keep practicing your wisdom.